piece is entitled The Debate, which we read to us by Anthony Bidulka. Peter Millard was born in Wales in 1932 and first came to Canada in 1955 to attend McGill University. He received a BA from McGill in 1959 and continued his education at Wadham College, Oxford, from which he received another BA and a PhD. Millard joined the University of Saskatchewan in 1961 as an instructor in English. He eventually became head of the department. He was also well known as leader in the arts community and a champion of human rights. This reading is an excerpt from his unpublished memoirs in his paper at the University of Saskatchewan Archives. The event described here took place in January 1974.
Having resolved to be open about my homosexuality, I decided I would try to get as much mileage out of it as possible. One of my voluntary activities at the university was to help the student debating team by acting as coach and sometimes as participant. The debating club held an annual exhibition match, and it was decided that year that the debate would be on something to do with homosexuality, which was fast becoming one of the hottest topics in the city. The resolution finally decided on was, God likes gays. Opposing the resolution was this Christian fundamentalist minister from the city, teamed with a graduate student from the English department, an articulate married woman, wife of a doctor, both who happened to be friends of mine. For the resolution were myself and a lesbian student. The lecture theater where the debate was to take place was packed. Every seat was filled and people were sitting on the floor in the aisles. We took our places on the platform at the front of the room, and while the preliminaries were going on, I scanned the rows of seats in front of me. You know, on occasions like this, you feel the need for friends. I spotted one or two faculty members who were sympathetic to the cause, and even more comforting, a clutch of gay people. But almost an entire row of seats, about halfway up the raked hall, was occupied by students from my freshman class. And that was rather alarming. Although I had been active in the gay community center for some time, my homosexuality was not general knowledge. There seemed to be a great deal of curiosity about the debate in general, and about the fact that an English professor was defending the resolution. During my speech in favor of the motion, in an attempt to get the best of both worlds by trying to answer irrationality with reason and, at the same time, appeal to emotions with rhetoric, I began one sentence casually with the words, "As a homosexual myself." There was an audible gasp from the audience, and I noticed the students from my freshman class look at each other in surprise. Now, it's got to be remembered that at this time, homosexuality was still a fairly novel topic, and it's extremely unlikely that anyone in the audience had ever heard a public declaration of homosexuality. It was an extraordinary feeling. I had broken cover and was standing in the brightly lit open. There was fear, but he was overwhelmed with this surge of euphoria. No more hiding, no more lies, no more deception. There was no going back now. The debate was over. Now I would see what the reaction would be. Outside, the wife of a departmental colleague came up to me. She said, "I'm very glad you did that." A somewhat different reaction came from a male, gay member of the department. "Peter, why did you do that? Your friends won't be able to talk to you now." It was sad to see what fear could do to this man who in all his relationships was more than ordinarily generous and loyal. He was also, incidentally, an example of how blind many gay people are about themselves. I mean, no one who had anything to do with this man was under any illusion about his sexuality. Yet it was so unthinkable to him that anyone should know about his homosexuality that he went about convinced that his secret was safe. The University of Saskatchewan now had its first openly gay faculty member, the only one. And from then on, my existence took on an element of the symbolic. I was the token homosexual. There would be snide remarks, the occasional joke, and more serious opposition. I mean, I never made it homosexuality an issue in the classroom, yet I know of one student, and there may have been more, who protested to the dean about having to take a class from a known homosexual. But by far, the more common reaction was either support or, more often, indifference. I did not know Peter Millard, but I do know that the ease with which I stand here today, the ease with which I have built a new career based on writing a mystery series that features a Saskatchewan gay detective, is directly a result of this event that happened almost 40 years ago. It was because Peter Millard had the daring to stand out in the brightly lit open that 10 years ago, when I published my very first book, I, with kind of a delicious sense of impunity, was able to plan for this huge launch of my first book, McNally Robinson. It never occurred to me that people wouldn't attend because the main character was gay. It never occurred to me that this city, that this community wouldn't support and rally around this book. And armed with that same confidence, I then planned this big book tour that took me all over Canada and into the United States. Now, I have to admit that at that point, I wondered what the reaction was going to be, what the reaction to me, what the reaction to a book that predominantly featured a gay character was going to be outside of this safe haven, this community of Saskatoon. Certainly, writing about a gay character distinguished me from all of my colleagues in Canada and pretty much all of my colleagues in the United States. So I was, ready to address the topic. Now you have to remember, as Jeff told you, I was a chartered accountant. So this was my first book. I didn't know what I was doing. So I go off on this tour, and eventually I am going to my very first mystery fan conference. And the way these things work is that you get, 100 or so mystery writers like myself, and then several hundred fans and people who like mysteries, and they attend this conference, and they're there to meet you and learn about your books. So I was invited to be part of this panel, and I think the topic was being a first-time writer. And the plan was that we would do our presentations, and at the end, we would open it up to what ended up being a rather large audience for questions. So we did our bit. It's time for questions. They took a microphone out into the audience. And from the back of the room, this big fellow comes loping up and addresses us. And the first question is for me. So I take a deep breath and think, okay, here it comes. So he starts off by saying, Mr. Bidulka, I would be interested to know whatever made you believe that you could write and publish and sell a mystery novel that features a detective who is from Saskatchewan. Indifference.